And welcome to America's Heroes Group, our roundtable and our partner Katz Milanec. Today is Saturday, December 17th, 2022. December is AIDS Awareness and National Human Rights Month. Our host is Kelley. I'm Sean Claiborne, the co-host. Our executive producer is Glenda Smith. And our digital media producer is Ivan Ortega of Scouts Honor Productions. And we have our partner on the line today. We've had him on our show a few times in the past. And we're going to talk about some things important to you. He's a CPA and president and founder of Katz Milanec Incorporated, and a military family member. We're going to talk about tax planning preparation for 2023 and also some helpful hints and things you're thinking about now. It's the end of the year, wrapping up, getting ready for tax time. Tax season is upon us. How you doing, Mr. Milanec?
Oh, I'm doing all right. Definitely want to share with you listeners, some important information. We got to talk about. It's a great time to plan for your taxes, and tax filing season is right around the corner, so a lot to talk about.
Yeah, the thing is, like, a lot of people don't think about planning for taxes. Usually, when we think about taxes, we think of it at the end of the tax season, when reality is we can probably do a little better if we think about our taxes ahead of time. So not thinking about when you're going to file your taxes in February or April, some people in January, but what are you going to do in January to prepare you for the next year? So thinking about 2023, give us some helpful hints of what we can do to prepare for really what we're talking about is 2024.
Well, even in December right now, you still got some time to plan for 2023, which is the 2022 filing season. And one of the things I would say is really big is you need to, if you are someone who is a business, and that includes everyone in the gig economy, by the way. So if you're driving Uber, Lyft, Instacart, what have you, if you're doing any of those things, you are in fact a business. They just didn't tell you that. So if you're operating under your Social Security number, that's typically about the worst way you can possibly operate. Consider incorporating. Consider what would be the best tax structure for you. In most cases, that's going to be an S corporation because it's going to eliminate the self-employment tax that you would have as a self-employed individual operating under your Social Security number. It also eliminates any sort of corporate level tax. So if that's something you need help with, definitely you can give us a call, 708-914-8220. We can help you out with that. And there's also, if you are in business, another thing you want to consider at this time of year is whether or not you're going to purchase any new items. Especially this year, 100% bonus depreciation is actually expiring at the end of this year. So if you want to participate in 100% bonus depreciation, you have to buy it by the end of the year to be able to get that deduction. It's not going to be available next year. Next year it goes down to 80. Year after that down to 60, then 40, then 20.
Wow. So tell us some other things. So what are some of the things that people oftentimes overlook when they're filing their taxes or trying to get some deductions at the last minute? So you talked about some things we can do in December. So December 31st, so most of the things you can do are pretty much expired. But what are some things is there anything you can do after December 31st that might affect your 2022 taxes when you file in 2023?
There actually are a couple of things. They're mostly geared toward saving. The IRS allows you as an individual to contribute to an individual retirement account and a health savings account up until April 15th of the following year and have it count for a prior year contribution. So if you have a high deductible health plan and you haven't opened up a health savings account and you go into your tax filing next year and you don't like what the numbers are, if you have some money that you can throw into a health savings account, you could do that. Also, if you have some money that you could throw into a retirement account, you could put that in there as well. Both of those become tax deductible, and then therefore you pay less in taxes because you have less taxable income when you go to file your tax return.
And then isn't there another tax benefit there for some certain people that make under a certain amount of income? If they put money into an IRA, do they get like a special savings or a special credit? It's up to
There's a non-refundable retirement savings tax credit. You can get up to, I believe, $2,000 per person. Mm-hmm. So on a married filing joint return, you could get up to $4,000. Typically, that's going to require a little bit of planning because you have to be fairly low income to qualify for that credit. But if you are someone who's relatively low income and you do contribute to a retirement account, you are eligible for that credit up to $2,000 per person.
I'm going to switch gears a little bit, but similar on the same topic, though. I noticed that you have, are you suffering from a cold? If, like the found said, you're a little bit under the weather. How you doing?
Yeah, I got a cold earlier in the week. I'm getting over it. My voice is always the last thing to recover, so.
Well, that's good. The one thing on the similar topic, but I know you're going to be in good spirits. I know that you're going to be in good health. I know you're going to recover. But unfortunately, we've had a lot of issues with the pandemic, and that has changed some things. Are there anything still left over for tax credits or things having to do with the pandemic in 2022?
So once again, this is going to be an area where businesses are going to definitely see most of the benefits. There are two things you can do. First off, if you were a self-employed individual at that time, you filed a Schedule C. There's a tax credit that you can claim that's up to $511 per day of days that you did not work. You have to have had income in the prior year, and then the income decreases in the following year. You're able to get a tax credit based on that up to $511 per day, and it's just a fully refundable credit. So I've seen people get $15,000, $20,000 refunds with that. And then the other big thing that's out there right now is if you are an employer who ran payroll in the second quarter of 2020 through the third quarter of 2021, in some cases the fourth quarter of 2021, but mostly for most employers it's going to be second quarter of 2020 through third quarter of 2021. If you are one of those employers that has run payroll, you could be eligible for something called the Employee Retention Credit, which you can get up to $26,000 per employee. The maximum is $10,000 per year in 2020, and you get a 50% credit, so you get a maximum of $5,000 credit per employee in 2020. And then in 2021, they made it a maximum of $10,000 per quarter for the first 3 quarters. And then the credit limit went from 50 to 70%. So instead of a $5,000 credit, you get $7,000 credit per quarter for a total of a maximum of $21,000 per employee that you can qualify for.
So these are things that are really, really important to know, particularly for small business owners. And a lot of people probably have not even considered these things or even talked about these things. Do you find a lot of small businesses don't have a trusted advisor in the tax realm? Because when you're planning a business, I think it's so important to have a CPA in your back pocket, to have a relationship with a CPA, to make sure that you get the information that you're describing today. Because these are things that it's not like you just pull open the Wall Street Journal and they're just going to tell you exactly what to do with your business. You have to apply the knowledge and do it in the correct way.
Absolutely, that's incredibly important. I'm a huge advocate of find the right person for you. Now that could be us. If it is, give us a call 708-914-8220. That could not be us, but it's important if you're starting a business. It's very important to find that person that you trust to guide you through the process of starting your business, getting you set up on the right path, and helping you along the way and figuring out how you grow your business. And typically that's going to be done through you take and you get the financial statements. You're only going to be able to do that through doing a regular bookkeeping and getting those financial statements and then analyzing those financial statements and figuring out the decisions you need to make to grow your business based on what those numbers are telling you. And again, that's another place where that key trusted advisor is going to be very important for you to be able to help you take your business to the next step. When do you decide to expand? When do you go for this line of credit? How do you do this thing? These are all key decisions that you have to be able to make as a business owner, and it's a lot easier to make those decisions when you know your numbers. And so it's very important to do that. And also, when you know your numbers, you're also able to plan for your taxes. And so that brings us right back to the first point, which was talking about planning the taxes. If you're at this point of the year and you don't know where you're at with your tax situation, you need to make sure you know that you've got enough paid in so that come April 15th, you're not going to be getting a big tax bill. If you've got your numbers and you know what your numbers are, you can reasonably project how much you're going to make for the year, and that will allow you to figure out how much you need to pay in. Sometimes you do need to pay in, and when you need to pay in, you can figure out what needs to be paid in, and that way you don't have to sit there on April 15th trying to figure out how am I going to come up with $15,000, $20,000, $30,000 that I didn't even know I was going to have to owe.
Right, and I think that's so important, like we talked about in the beginning of the show. Make sure you start planning. So for the late starters or the people that maybe procrastinated, reach out, make a relationship with a trusted CPA. The CPAs are so critical for small business, particularly even high net worth individuals. Even if you don't necessarily own a business, but you're a high net worth individual, make sure you have a CPA who is answering your tax questions and help guide you to keep Uncle Sam out of your back pocket. That's so important. It's critical.
Absolutely, it is. Absolutely, because even like you mentioned, high net worth people. One thing a lot of people want to do nowadays is take traditional IRAs and convert them to Roth IRAs. Well, how do you do that? Well, one way you could do it is that you take the entire amount of money and just slap it over to the other account, and you're going to pay a boatload of taxes doing that.
Mm-hmm. Right.
The smarter way to do that is if you go and you find someone who can help you plan out, okay, well, what's the most amount we can take out that's not going to put you into a new tax bracket, and then let's take that amount out, and then you'll pay that percentage of tax on that amount, and you put the rest in the Roth, and we keep doing that year over year over year until you've got the whole thing migrated over. And that way you probably save yourself 15 to 20% in taxes.
Oh my God, you're preaching to the choir here, man. I mean, that is something that is, you just gave that right there. We owe you a bill. I think the United States owes you a bill for giving that information now over social media and over the radio. I think that is so important. I mean, you hit it. I think the nail on the head is if you plan ahead and do these types of things, you save so much money. So stop thinking about taxes. We tend to think about taxes as what we do at the end of the year, but when we start planning ahead, the world is wholly different. Now riddle me this. So what is the difference between a CPA versus an enrolled agent?
So both are authorized to practice before the Internal Revenue Service. That is a key thing. And that is an important thing because if the IRS comes knocking and you have someone like me as your power of attorney, they don't knock on your door, they call me. And that can be huge for a business owner or for anyone. I mean, first off, you don't have to deal with the scare of, oh my God, the IRS just showed up at my office. And secondly, we can get information from them before they start getting information from you. And that can make a huge difference because the IRS is trained to trick people and trip people up and get people to give them information that they shouldn't necessarily give them. For example, you know where you bank. I don't know where you bank. And that's just one small example of information that they'll try to get out of you that that can cause you a lot of problems. Now, you asked what the difference between a CPA and an enrolled agent. Well, an enrolled agent can also practice before the IRS. The difference for a CPA can also audit financial statements and sign those financial statements as audited and certify them as audited. An enrolled agent is not allowed to do that. Other than that, I mean, mostly they're going to be doing a lot of similar work, especially if they're in the tax field. If they're in the tax field, they're almost identical.
It seems like if I were a small business, because I had this question posed to me a few times, but as a small business, I think I would lean toward the CPA yet still because of some of the things that you mentioned.
Well, so here's the thing. CPA, EA, attorney, it doesn't really matter which way it goes. The point is you want to get someone that you trust and that you know knows what they're doing, because I don't care what letters they have behind their name. I mean, don't get me wrong. I like that I have a CPA. I am very grateful that I have a CPA, and I use it to the fullest extent that I can.
And you worked hard to get it. It's something that you earned.
Yeah, absolutely. But at the same time, not all CPAs are created equal. So you don't go to the foot doctor to get your head fixed, right?
Mm-hmm.
So similarly, you need to make sure that the CPA that you pick understands your business, because I can tell you there's a lot of people out there with the letters CPA behind their name that they're just going to check the boxes and fill out the forms and say what you owe according to the government, and that's it. They're not going to help you plan. They're not going to help you be that trusted advisor and guide you and help you grow your business and take your business to the next level. That's what we want to do at Katz Milanec. Give us a call, 708-914-8220.
Wow, it's really critical. I think you brought up some really important points. Now, on the same topic of illnesses and what's happened since the pandemic, God, help us all, but we've overcome a lot of that. However, in the aftermath, we've lost a lot of people in the last few years since the pandemic has hit. The death toll was the highest it's been in, I think, over a century in 2020. And we still have a lot of people that are passing on from the residents.
It's over 10 million now, right?
Yeah. So the thing is that people are receiving inherited funds. So we're getting a lot of money that's being rolled over from IRAs to them. They're inheriting these things or inheriting assets. But a lot of people are confused about what they pay taxes on and what they don't pay taxes on. We talk about annuities, we talk about IRAs, we talk about just cash and stocks and bonds and things like that, stepped up cost basis, all this stuff. Can you kind of give us a quick rundown as what they need to think about if they're inheriting funds or inheriting an estate, what they need to think about when they plan for their taxes?
Yeah. So first off, so there's actually two factors here. Okay. The first one is the one that everyone thinks of, which is the big scary inheritance tax form. I think it's called a 706. It might be a 709. It's one of the two. The other one's the gift tax form. So the inheritance tax form is the one. If you have assets over $11 million, you pay taxes on the overage of the $11 million. Or in the case of married couples, $22 million. Now, life insurance proceeds are the only thing that I'm aware of that are actually excluded from that portion of things. Mm-hmm. So if you have life insurance proceeds, that's just completely not taxable. You just get that. But everything else is subject to an $11 million or $22 million asset threshold. After that, you pay inheritance tax on it. What most people don't think about, though, because they don't typically have to deal with that. Most people don't have to deal with an $11 million threshold or anything like that. When they find out it's $11 million, they're like, oh, well, there's no way it's going to exceed that, so everything's good. Well, not so fast, because let's say Dad's house was left to you, and now you have to rent it, and you rent it out for 6 months, and then you sell it. Okay, well, that house generated over $600 of income now. So now you have to file an estate income tax return, a Form 1041. You also have to make sure that the final year return of the decedent is filed. So, for example, if somebody dies this year, you have to file a 2022 tax return for them. If they die in January, you have to file a 2023 tax return for them, unless they don't have a filing requirement because of income limitations. But if you then inherit assets that produce income, you then have to make sure you pay the estate income tax return. You have to make sure you file the estate income tax return. And typically you're going to want to send the proceeds through to the individuals on a K-1, because otherwise you're going to be paying trust tax rates, and those are the highest tax rates in the country.
You're not lying. So you gave us some great information. I wish I could ask you some more questions. Got tons of stuff I wanted to get into. We'll save that for next time. Keep this in your back pocket. Next time when you come back, I'm going to ask you the question about when you inherit assets. In that same conversation, when you inherit assets, when do they use the date of receiving the asset? Because this is an important question. The date the person passed away versus the date that you actually received.
I can give that answer real quick. It's the date of the death of the decedent.
All right, perfect. There we go. And so there we go. So Katz Milanec, CPA, president and founder of the Katz Milanec Incorporated, and a military family member. We appreciate your time and all the things you've given us today.
Always a pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
This is America's Heroes Group. We'll be right back.
Thank you for watching another episode of America's Heroes Group, where we provide education about resources and information for our veterans, military, and their family.
We have in our chase bags, we have a care package of hygiene, we have shaving equipment, we have razors, and for the women we have the same personal hygiene items for them as well. And we want to say thank you for their service. This is Chase Bank. Thank you very much. People in the neighborhood, free haircuts, the service, the food. Look good. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your service. Thank you, ma'am. Okay.
On behalf of Cliff Kelley, America's Heroes Group, we sincerely thank Chase Bank for coming where it matters to help homeless veterans have a hot meal today and a care package. We are sincerely grateful for this partnership. Yeah.
Welcome to America's Heroes Group. Hear your voice where we connect the disconnected intentionally.
Who is Cliff Kelley, the governor of talk radio, the icon of radio throughout the world.
Chauncey Spencer II and I, again, share a special relationship. His late great father, Tuskegee Airman Chauncey E. Spencer, took me as a child on my first airplane ride.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is something that people need to see. Often we don't, do the things to show how great our people are. It changes the paradigm of how people think about us, about the collective consciousness of what it means to be us.
And we've been having great conversations about trying to get more African Americans into aviation. And we got a bill that we're trying to get passed that would allow the Pell Grant to be used to help finance aviation education.
Where I started with this entire conversation by saying, if it were not for America's Heroes Group, I would have given up. So I want to get all my accolades out the way on behalf of America's Heroes Group. Ms. Glenda, thank you. Thank you for encouraging me to press on. I would encourage you all to support this organization. One thing for sure, America's Hero Group is out there. Ms. Glenda will take the time. Ms. Glenda Smith will take the time to listen to you and to steer you in the direction that you need to go.
Thank you for watching another episode of America's Heroes Group, where we provide education about resources and information for our veterans, military, and their family. Welcome to America's Hero.
Partner, the AIDPH, which is the American Institute of Dental Public Health. Today is Saturday, December 17th. December is AIDS Awareness and National Human Rights Month. Our host is Cliff Kelley. You heard him at the break. Our co-host is me, Sean Claiborne, an Army National Guard veteran. Our executive producer is Glenda Smith, and our digital media producer is Ivan Ortega of Scouts Honor Productions. And we have our partner on the line, Dr. Annaliese Cothron. She's a co-founder and executive director of the American Institute of Dental Public Health. She manages the program fund development and overall strategy of the AIDPH. And we're going to go over the year in review. How you doing, Miss Dr. Cothron? How you doing?
Hi, Sean. Great to be here. Good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you. So tell us, what has 2022 done for your organization, and also what are you looking forward to in 2023?
Yeah, I'm so excited to be able to share what AIDPH has done this year. For those of you who may not be familiar with AIDPH, even though we are on America's Heroes Group every month around this time, so feel free to tune in if you want to learn more about what we're doing and also keep up with what we're doing next year. But in case this is your first time listening and you're not familiar with AIDPH, we're a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to the science and education of dental public health. And that term may not sound familiar to you, dental public health, but essentially it's just a specialty of dentistry, which means that we're public health focused. We are really attuned to population health and ensuring that underserved communities get access to dental care. So that's the core part of what dental public health as a specialty is. And then what we do here at AIDPH is working with our core communities of focus to help improve access to dental care, help improve quality of dental care, and also just prepare oral health professionals to be able to treat and provide support to underserved and marginalized communities. So here at AIDPH, our core communities of focus include people living in rural areas, LGBTQIA+ people, veterans, and the broader oral health workforce. And so looking ahead to 2023, we're adding a fifth community of focus, which is people with disabilities. Throughout this year, we actually learned that, people with disabilities, it's an incredibly diverse group. I'm sure most of us probably have experienced a disability at some point, probably have a friend or family member who has a disability. And so we recognized, working particularly with veterans, that we were mostly supporting disabled veterans, especially with our policy and advocacy work. And so it felt like a natural extension for AIDPH to really commit and strengthen that focus in 2023. So we're really excited to be able to add that focus, and we hope folks will stay tuned and also, keep us accountable, keep us committed to ensuring that we're doing all the right things to support people living with disabilities. So we're really excited to extend our focus and our work into that area. But throughout 2022, we had a lot of success, mostly in our education spaces and our science and research spaces. We have 5 goals, and you can find our impact report and kind of exactly what our mission, vision, values, goals, objectives, all of that. You can find that on our website on www.aidph.org. If you head over to the communications tab, you'll find our impact report for this year and subsequent years, if that's of interest. But kind of our 2022 roadmap, we had 4 key areas that we were interested in making some movement in. Number 1 being elevate oral health equity in those core communities of focus. Number 2, transform the oral health workforce through leadership and capacity building. Number 3, generating research that disrupts inequitable systems of oral health. And then number 4, forge partnerships among diverse stakeholders as trusted brokers of health equity. And, I would say just in that 4th space right now, thinking through our partnership with America's Heroes Group, we've really been able to forge those really cool partnerships that help us ultimately expand the other places too, like, with America's Heroes Group being able to invest in veterans, expand our impact. And we've also been able to share a lot of our research through this podcast as well.
So take me through, first of all, why is dental health not taken as seriously as other parts of the body? So dental health we've talked about this in previous times you've been on the show, it plays such an important part in your overall health. People just think that, oh, you have a toothache or a serious pain when something goes wrong in your mouth. But the problem is that it also can lead to other very serious things in your body. Why is it not taken as serious as it should be?
That's an interesting question, Sean, because to me, I would venture to say that the average person probably takes their dental care very seriously. I think it's our systems and the people in charge of those systems who aren't prioritizing our dental care. When it comes to our policy and advocacy work, we like to say that this, everybody has a mouth. This is not a partisan political issue. Everybody has a mouth, and everybody wants to feel healthy. Everybody wants to feel like they can chew, like they can eat, like they can smile. And so I really think the lack of priority for dental care across the U.S. and particularly for veterans, I think it's because from the very beginning, many years ago, whenever we set up Medicaid and Medicare, dental was never included in that. Neither was vision and some of these other things. And so for some reason, because of how our insurance system was set up, it means that dental care has really been siloed. It's been completely not prioritized, and the subsequent or the consequence of that has been that dental care is so expensive. So I would probably counter and say, I think we all probably think that's pretty important, but unfortunately our policymakers and those who are making decisions in leadership don't prioritize this, and certainly that counts for veterans too. A big piece of our advocacy this year has been bringing awareness to the lack of coverage that veterans experience for dental care. 85% of veterans are not eligible for dental care through the VA. So we're talking about 85% of veterans who are getting their medical care in the VA are not eligible to get their dental care in the VA. And of that 15% that are eligible, only a third actually utilize that benefit. And that's because they don't understand their benefits. It may be difficult to actually access that care and access VA dental clinics. So I think that, again, based on our research that we've been able to accomplish this year, we know that veterans care about their dental care and their oral health. It's a top priority for veterans, but for some reason, it hasn't been prioritized in our health system implementation.
So how do we change that through advocacy and some of the work you guys are doing and things like that? How do we get on top of that to make our policyholders and change the system so that insurance companies start to think about this as not as a silo or something separate from the main body, but also something that you, when you get your health insurance, is just part of what you need. We're all going to have problems with our teeth at some point. We're either going to get dentures, you're going to get cavities, you're going to have loose teeth or whatever. Something's going to happen to your teeth. Right.
I think, number one, if you are a veteran and you're listening to this, you have to make your voice heard. You have to tell your elected officials that this is unacceptable. And unfortunately, this is a really complicated issue because it has to do with federal policy. So federal policy and the federal code actually dictates the type of benefits that veterans are able to receive, how much money those benefits cost, what priority groups, et cetera. And it can actually get pretty complicated and nuanced. Like even for veterans, again, our research indicates that 42% of veterans don't actually understand whether or not they have dental benefits. It's that complicated.
That's crazy though.
So first off, we have to change federal code to expand eligibility, right? That's step one. Step two is that we also have to have budget for it. It means that the federal government has to make a budget to cover that care. So veterans should be writing their elected officials. They should be emailing their members of Congress. They should be talking to their senators and saying, we want to change the federal code because we need help, we need support. And so I think that this is one of an opportunity for veteran-led effort. And two, it's an opportunity for anybody, for oral health professionals, for advocates, to help veterans have their voices heard by supporting this at the federal level as a federal policy change.
And you mentioned also, too, about inequity in dental coverage and also dental health. Tell us, take it a little bit deeper into that situation. So, how is dental health, if basically everybody has to get pretty much seems like they're on their own getting their dental health for the most part. How is it inequitable for different groups of people? Because you mentioned that you advocate for many groups of people, that everybody has different challenges. So take me through those different challenges and obstacles to getting that dental health care.
Right. Well, I think probably most people listening understand, or if you have dental care, it's probably through your employer, right? So most of the time you get your medical and dental benefits through an employer. And that kind of dictates how much money you're going to have to pay out of pocket. It dictates what you have access to. And so number one, right off the bat, if you are not employed, or if you're not employed full time, if you are unhoused, if you are, say, working from home and maybe you're self-employed, et cetera, right there kind of already gives you a cutoff for a potential barrier. Since most of our health care is actually connected to who we are employed by and how much they're able to afford to give us in health care, that already sets up an inequitable system and an inequitable access to care point. But we also understand that there are, in public health, we like to talk a lot about the social determinants of health. I like to reframe this as actually the political determinants of health. Because a lot of times these social determinants, which are kind of these everyday pieces of our life and our world that impact how we can access care and how healthy we're actually allowed to be, how we're allowed to have the opportunity to access care. So a determinant of health can be physically where you're located, whether or not you have sidewalks, whether or not you have access to transportation to get you to a medical or dental appointment, whether or not you have access to a grocery store that has fresh fruits and vegetables. Those are all part of those social determinants of health. But if you look up from there, kind of upstream on how those social determinants are kind of enacted or enabled, we recognize that it's often very political and policy driven, that where you have the opportunities to have help at that level are determined by policies. And so a big piece of what we do here in public health is try to influence those policies toward more equitable oral health. I'm kind of thinking through those other communities that we focus on, veterans, which we've talked about, LGBTQIA plus people, and also rural oral health. Each one of those layers of either environment or identity actually impacts your ability to be healthy. It influences the opportunities that you have for health. One thing that we actually did this year, and it was the first ever, we're very, very proud of it, was LGBTQIA Oral Health Week. And so we got a lot of questions in October saying, I don't understand, how are those two things related? Like, how is your identity as an LGBTQIA plus person, how is that connected to your oral health and well-being? And it's through that connection of those social determinants. We know that LGBTQIA plus people face a disproportionate impact or a disproportionate amount of discrimination. That's well documented. And even kind of stress or trauma. I know this year there was a lot of uncertainty around whether or not, for instance, people who are gay or married to somebody of the same gender, whether or not they were going to actually be able to stay married to their spouse. So we were very much celebrating the recent Respect for Marriage Act because those stressors can actually impact your ability to be healthy and how much biochemicals are released through stress and anxiety and depression. And that actually impacts your oral health too. I mean, think about it. If you're chronically stressed or anxious, are you going to prioritize brushing your teeth every day? That might feel really, really difficult. So we were able to go through and highlight how all of these really big environmental and social stressors can actually be connected to your oral health and have an impact on it.
So you mentioned some stressors. Also, I imagine diet might change when you have certain types of, different types of demographics. If you're in a food desert, if you're going through different types of trauma or stress in your life, maybe you're the type of person who reaches out to sugary sweets and for comfort food or whatever. All these things, I'd imagine, could have a big impact on cavities in your dental health. What are So what are some of the things that we can do as just individuals every single day? And I'm asking another question back to this previous question, but first, before we get there, what can we do as everyday people to make sure that we have good dental health in the absence of health coverage for dental?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think everybody at this point understands brush your teeth twice a day, right? Like that's an easy one. I actually read recently that flossing can be more important than brushing just because of all of the bacteria that gets in between your teeth. And we also, in public health, really emphasize brushing your teeth with fluoridated toothpaste. So fluoride helps to remineralize your teeth. It helps to keep them strong. That's why we advocate for community water fluoridation, because it can often help combat cavities and keep your teeth healthy and strong. So that's an easy one. I'm sure most people know that. But you've already touched on a really big one here, too, which is diet. You want to make sure that you're eating foods with less sugar. And I think a lot of us access sugar more than we realize through sugar-sweetened beverages. So that can be juices, sodas. Always read the nutrition facts on the back of your labels, because a lot of times sugar will just sneak in on those sugar-sweetened beverages. So we always emphasize drinking plain water as much as you can and just limiting sugar-sweetened beverages. Also, from a public health perspective, we're really focused on ensuring that folks reduce what's called cariogenic foods, which is basically cavity-causing foods. So things like carbs, which oftentimes we don't realize.
Carbs?
Yeah, carbohydrates.
So
that's right. I know, it's a bummer.
Like
I know.
Man.
It's a huge bummer.
No more ravioli.
And the big thing people don't realize is that crackers are one of the most cariogenic foods.
What?
Because, yes, they get stuck in your teeth, especially in those back molars. They can get stuck in like the biting surfaces of your teeth. So especially for little kids, like goldfishes and everything like that, we think we're giving them something healthy, and they can actually be more damaging at times.
So the dentist do us a favor. I remember back in the day, growing up as a kid, they would push in sugarless gum. Was the Dental Association, American Dental Association, were they doing us a good job when they told us about chewing sugarless gum or sugar-free gum?
Well, I think the intention here is to try to make choices. If you realize maybe you have a pattern of a unhealthy diet choice, that maybe finding a good substitute can still keep you, from not having to being able to enjoy things like gum, if that's what you like, but being able to make a switch to like sugar-free or kind of reducing those sugar-sweetened beverages. Maybe you drink them several times a day. Maybe you limit it to just once a day. I think it's about making those easy lifestyle choices that are attainable, right? So I think a lot of our research this year has focused on predominantly kind of what we can do in those core communities of focus. We haven't focused as much on nutrition, but if I can, I wanted to share with you an article that we just came out with. I think it was just released this week, and it was actually on analyzing PPP loan data. So the Paycheck Protection Program, I think everybody is probably familiar with it, but just in case you're not, that was a program that was developed by the federal government as a response to COVID and ensuring that small businesses stayed afloat whenever things were shutting down. So you could apply to get funding for your small business if you were impacted by COVID-19. And so what we did is took the data from that PPP loan program and we analyzed differences in dental businesses, right? So, dental clinics, dental businesses, small business owners who were dentists, they were certainly impacted by COVID-19. In fact, dentistry in most places was deemed as a non-essential medical procedure or medical care. And so many dental offices shut down for several months. And the only thing that was allowed in most states was if you had an emergency dental need, right? And so as a result, many dental businesses applied for PPP loan funding. And so we analyzed that data. It's data from the federal government. Anybody can analyze it. It's open to the public. And what we looked at is differences in loan amounts. So how much money a dental business was allowed to get from the federal government, and also loan forgiveness. And we looked at that and compared women-owned dental businesses, racial and ethnic minority-owned dental businesses, rural and veteran-owned dental businesses. And what our research showed was that women and racial minority-owned dental businesses received fewer loans, less money, and they also received less loan forgiveness. So essentially, women and racial minority-owned businesses were getting less money from the federal government and having less of that money forgiven at the end of the PPP loan tenure. So it was really shocking.
But why was that?
And also very sad.
Why was that?
I don't know. I wish I had an answer for you. I think that's really where we were able to analyze the data. You know, it's kind of limited in the number of indicators, but I think the impacts here are that women and minority-owned businesses, one, did not receive the financial support that they needed. And then number two, they were also shouldered with debt if they had less of their loans forgiven. So that means people who were probably maybe disenfranchised from the beginning as small business owners were left even more disenfranchised based on these PPP loans and the inequitable funding that was associated with them.
So this leads me to the question I was saving for you last time. So are we moving in a better direction? So one thing I think is positive is that there's organizations like yours that actually are doing the data and getting the research, because without the information, we really can't address the problem. So are you seeing change or movement with the information that's been coming out?
I would say in some areas, yes. One thing that we definitely celebrated this year was actually the change of Medicare. Maybe it was a change, maybe it wasn't. It depends on how you interpret it. So we, dental public health and public policy folks, were actually celebrating an interpretation of medically necessary care under the Medicaid rule and scope, such that some dental procedures are now deemed medically necessary and can be covered through Medicare. That was after years and years and years of advocacy, and it left kind of a small opening for us to get some dental care procedures covered through Medicare. So I would say in some ways, man, that was such a win. That took years of people advocating just to get that incremental change. So while I certainly celebrate that success, I can also say we really have a long way to go. AIDPH is not the only organization that's been advocating for expanded access to care for veterans. Veterans have been advocating for this for years. Advocates like the VFW have been advocating for this for years, and we still haven't seen any movement or momentum. I will also say in the same breath, we know that some states like Oregon recently expanded their Medicaid to include dental benefits for veterans, which was great. States like Iowa actually have a trust fund for veterans to be able to get grants to access medical care. So there are some states that are really taking care of their veterans and really seeing some momentum in expanding access to care and expanding coverage for care. But it's a mixed bag, because in some ways we've seen a lot of success, and then I think in other ways we just really need to acknowledge how far we have left to go.
So that brings us back to 2023. So in 2023, what do you want to do, or what do you want to do to try to grease those wheels a little bit more?
Yeah, so in 2023, we are still hyper-focused on our policy and advocacy. We're certainly not letting that die. We are still pressing for the federal code to be changed so that veterans have expanded access to dental care. That's really critically important to us. We're also excited to continue our research and really expanding how we're viewing our core community of focus, how we're looking at ways to expand access to dental care, in particular for veterans, yes, and for people with disabilities. One of the areas of interest that we're really looking into is something called trauma-informed care. This is not new. This is something that's been done in medical care probably for a lot longer, and it has not adopted well into oral health just yet. But really, it's a means of care delivery that is more sensitive and understanding to how people may be experiencing medical care, dental care, especially dental care, it feels really invasive, right? Like you go to the dentist and you're laying there, your mouth is open. Sometimes your hygienist is talking to you, and it can be painful. And so using trauma-informed, right, exactly, you can feel afraid to be there. So using a trauma-informed approach actually just means being more sensitive to the needs of veterans, to people who may be, survivors of other types of trauma, and investing in getting oral health professionals to use those techniques. It can be as simple as just narrating what you're doing to the patient. Like you would think that's natural, right? You would think that's something that every person does, right? That doesn't always happen. You don't always ask for consent before you touch somebody or, do a procedure in somebody's mouth, what have you. So we're really looking to invest in understanding that better. And then we really want to build leadership. We really want to build leadership in the oral health community. We want people to know how to go into their community, support marginalized populations, and support our mission, vision, and values into 2023 with great partners like America's Heroes Group.
That is Dr. Annaliese Cothron, the co-founder and executive director of the American Institute of Dental Public Health. She manages the program fund development and overall strategy of the AIDPH, and she gave us great information for 2023. We appreciate your time. And always.
Thanks so much, Sean. Always. Appreciate it.
This is America's Heroes Group. We'll be right back.
Thank you for watching another episode of America's Heroes Group, where we provide education about resources and information for our veterans, military, and their family.
We have in our chase bags, we have a care package of hygiene, we have shaving equipment, we have razors, and for the women we have the same personal hygiene items for them as well. And we want to say thank you for their service. This is Chase Bank. Thank you very much.
People in the neighborhood, free haircuts, the service, the food. Look good. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your service.
Thank you for your service.
Okay. On behalf of Cliff Kelley, America's Heroes Group, we sincerely thank Chase Bank for coming where it matters to help homeless veterans have a hot meal today and a care package. We are sincerely grateful for this partnership. Yeah.
Welcome to America's Heroes Group. Hear your voice where we connect the disconnected intentionally.
Who is Cliff Kelley, the governor of talk radio, the icon of radio throughout the world.
Chauncey Spencer II and I, again, share a special relationship. His late great father, Tuskegee Airman Chauncey E. Spencer, took me as a child on my first airplane ride.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is something that people need to see. Often we don't, do the things to show how great our people are. It changes the paradigm of how people think about us, about the collective consciousness of what it means to be us.
And we've been having great conversations about trying to get more African Americans into aviation. And we got a bill that we're trying to get passed that would allow the Pell Grant to be used to help finance aviation education.
Where I started with this entire conversation by saying, if it were not for America's Heroes Group, I would have given up. So I want to get all my accolades out the way on behalf of America's Heroes Group. Ms. Glenda, thank you. Thank you for encouraging me to press on. I would encourage you all to support this organization. one thing for sure, America's Hero Group is out there. Miss Glenda will take the time. Miss Glenda Smith will take the time to listen to you and to steer you in the direction that you need to go.
Thank you for watching another episode of America's Heroes Group, where we provide education about resources and information for our veterans, military, and their family. Welcome to America's Heroes Group, with information and resources that's disseminated intentionally to empower our military population, with host Vietnam veteran Cliff Kelley, co-host Iraq veteran Colonel Dr. Damon Arnold, and co-host Army National Guard veteran Sean Claiborne. And now, America's Heroes Group. Thank you for watching another episode of America's Heroes Group, where we provide education about resources and information for our veterans, military, and their family.
Welcome back to America's Hero Group. This time our roundtable community outreach. Today is Saturday, December 17th, 2022. Our host is Cliff Kelley. I'm Sean Claiborne, the co-host. Our executive producer is Glenda Smith. Our digital media producer is Ivan Ortega of Scouts Honor Productions. And remember December's AIDS Awareness and National Human Rights Month. And we have our panelists on the line back again, Dr. Terrell Odom. He's director for the Office for Military Affiliated Communities, OMAC, at the University of Chicago, and the chairman of the Mayor's Advisory Council on Veterans Affairs. And we're going to talk about the University of Chicago's Office of Military Affiliated Communities, mission, purpose, and services, and many good things they're doing at the UFC here in Chicago, my backyard. How you doing, Doctor?
Good evening, gents. How are you guys? Thanks for having me on again.
Our pleasure, our pleasure. So what do you have for us? Tell us about some of the things you guys are doing. I looked at a lot of interesting stuff, but I was really impressed. But the University of Chicago, we know, it's the house that Rockefeller built. This is a very impressive university. It's got a lot of accolades. Have done a lot of things that have changed the world in human development and also science and research and politics. It's number 2 in the country, however, as one of the best universities for veterans by U.S. News and World Report. On top of that, Chicago Booth School of Business ranked number 1 for business, Crown Family School ranked number 2 for social work, the Harris School of Public Policy ranked number 3 for public policy analysis, and the university's law school ranked number 3 for law. That is highly impressive with all the great colleges we have here in Chicago. The University of Chicago is one of the many gems we have here in this area. Tell us about how all of this plays into OMAC, because a lot of these different accolades really center around the fields and areas of study that you guys are focused on. We're talking about social policy, law, we're talking about veterans, we're talking about business even, social work. All these things tie together in your mission, it seems like.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And again, thanks again for mentioning all those great accolades as well as rankings for all of our units across the university. I'm from Chicago, so again, as you know, University of Chicago is that flagship, if you will, Ivy Plus institution that provides world-class research and scholarship to many individuals, not just to the military-affiliated population, but bringing in a diverse group of service members and veterans and their families to the university, I believe has helped to broaden our horizons. I know we've spoken in detail about our Veterans Restorative Justice Project, and mentioning those particular units, the Chicago Booth School, the Chicago Law School, the Crown Family School of Social Work Policy and Practice, our social sciences. We've taken that interdisciplinary approach and utilizing our military-affiliated students who are pursuing graduate and professional degrees and giving them an opportunity to put their learning to work as students, working to help to reintegrate our veterans who unfortunately are involved in the criminal justice system, including the courts as well as the jail system. We have several other big projects that are currently brewing, one being our Skill Bridge program. For those who are not aware, the Department of Defense allows for service members to transition out of military service up to 6 months early of the military, still receiving their pay from their respective branch or from the DOD, and allowing them to get a jump start or an early start on transitioning into the next phase of their careers and their lives. And I'm pretty sure, as you guys know, making that transition as well, that can be a really, really tough time for a lot of individuals, and I'll say even more so for individuals who have families. When you're coming back to your home state, trying to find employment, trying to find housing, trying to find some type of stability, resource network, etc., it can become tough. It can become frustrating to a lot of individuals. So with our Skill Bridge program, what we do is we allow these active duty persons to transition, again, early, up to 6 months, into employment opportunities, whether they be at the university as well as opportunities that fall outside the university. We have tons of networking opportunities for them to be able to build that community of resources of what they're going to need to be successful. They can tap into our military-affiliated student groups and learn from their peers about their transition, as well as avenues for higher education. We have a family readiness program, which is equivalent to most of the branches' family readiness group, which is a group of military spouses and families that help with that transition for those individuals. And we also allow for them to get an early start again on higher education. With the creation of the new post 9/11 GI Bill, 2008, created in 2008 and active 2009. The research is saying that close to 65% of individuals leaving military service are also looking to go into higher education. Of course, now with the GI Bill having a housing component as well as a tuition component that's paid directly to the institution, many veterans and service members, right, take that as an opportunity or see that as an opportunity to get ahead on their educational goals as well, while they also choose to pursue educational programs. I'll brag on our Booth School, our law school, policy school. Well, forgive me, I'll leave out the law at this point, but many of our grad units have also incorporated evening programs for the working professionals. Again, this is not just for the military affiliated population, but for the adult population. Many individuals who still do have to work to be able to provide for their families. So this community here at UChicago, including OMAC serves as the central hub for all the resources, programming, and support for the entire military affiliate community. It's just not simply a student aspect, but also the staff and faculty. So we take those three different subgroups, if you will, of individuals, and we bring them together. So those shared experiences make a better experience for those individuals who are transitioning out of service.
I think that's really a important part of what you guys are doing at OMAC, because you're tying in, it's not just about the individual veteran, but it's their families, and then also not just the veteran community, but how the veteran community impacts the broader community through the knowledge and experience that they've gotten through the military, but then to advance that and apply that to improve and strengthen communities around the country. I think that's really, at the end of the day, that is it seems like the result of all the work you guys are culminating together. How does a service member get into the program?
For the SkillBridge program, we do have the website. Again, you can go to veterans.uchicago.edu, but our SkillBridge program is listed on the website. They must gain approval from their individual command of whether or not they can participate in a SkillBridge program, but it's fairly simple. You'll go to our website, veterans.uchicago.edu, look for the SkillBridge tab across the top. A person submits some information to us, which is what we call our applicant inquiry form. But in the applicant inquiry form, we would like to have, of course, a copy of your resume, a statement of service, which is basically something on letterhead from your respective branch that lets us know that you are, in fact, in the military, how long you've been in, and when you're expected to get out, because they don't have that golden paper, that DD-214 yet. We would also like a writing sample and a copy of your Meal Gears report, which is a much more expansive view of your military experience outside of the Joint Service transcripts and even the Air Force's CCAF. But let me be clear that our SkillBridge program, and I'll have to use Major Prosser, Eric Prosser, who's one of my current interns. He's a pilot in the Air Force. We're not a competitive SkillBridge program. It's whether or not we have opportunities for you here at the university. So it's not I'm competing against 20 other individuals for this one particular spot. We have several places across the university, the medical center, our lab affiliates being Fermi and Argonne, respectively, where we find these opportunities and match them up to what your career goals are. I'll use, again, Major Prosser, who's currently in my SkillBridge program. He and I were just actually at the university today giving away gifts and toys with Tutoring Chicago for children in the Chicagoland area. But Eric's goal is to get his graduate degree in business, as well as learn better how to support other transitioning service members that will be coming in the future. So naturally, Eric matched into my office. We have other individuals who may not have college degrees, but looking to get into the tech field or looking to get into healthcare, whatever the case may be. We had 2 Army medics who recently completed our SkillBridge program at the university through our medical center, working in our cancer center and trauma center, respectively. They completed their undergrad degrees while in military service, but they were lacking that research experience on their applications to become stronger candidates for medical school. Since completing our SkillBridge program, they both are now full-time employees with the University of Chicago Medical Center, one, Corporal Choi, will actually be attending medical school for 23, and Sergeant Yu will be applying to attend in 2024. So again, it's how can we help you? Again, which University of Chicago, as you know, is pretty big. We have several units, and I'm happy that more and more units across the university, the medical center, have reached out and are willing to participate. We got people in human resources, procurement, facility services, the medical center, the office of the provost, just everywhere. So I'm happy to see the support that's coming from the university to better support our military families and the service members.
Now, SkillBridge, is that something that's unique to Chicago or University of Chicago? Is that something that's there are similar programs across the country?
Oh, no, this is a DOD program. The DOD has, oh my God, hundreds, maybe even thousands now. But the SkillBridge program was created around 2017. The last time I was on your show, I told you about the UMAP program, which I know you guys are familiar with, the Utility Military Assistance Program, which working with Rick Passarelli, Liz Belcaster, and several other individuals, was created here in 2012. I also helped with that particular project. And out of 1,200 total gas utility workers in the city of Chicago, through People's Gas, close to 800 of them are veterans, reservists, and Guard members. Back then, 2012, you simply had to be a Department of Labor approved program. And that program, as well as the TMAP, which is a Transportation Military Assistance Program, those were the flagships of what introduced SkillBridge, which again gave employers more opportunities to get earlier access to transitioning service members.
And how can you find out information about all these different programs? So say someone maybe doesn't want to travel to Chicago, or they may be a better fit in a different program in another part of the country. Is there a centralized place where they can find all this information?
Absolutely. They can go to Google and just type in DOD, Delta Oscar Delta, SkillBridge, and you'll find the Department of Defense's SkillBridge site, which will take them to every single SkillBridge provider throughout the country, and they can search or sort by state. And they'll be able to see those types of opportunities that are out there. I'll just throw some out. John Deere, Amazon, Lowe's, Home Depot, pretty much many people have them, just again, based on what that person's goals are going to be when they leave military service. Some of us have to go directly into employment to be able to provide for our families. Some do not. Some have the option, again, to go directly into higher education, et cetera. Ours is unique because it covers all three. It covers the transition piece for a person who may be retiring, learning to jump into a new career. It covers a piece of those jumping directly into employment that could still be in the same field of what they did in the military, and also allows that gateway for those who are looking to enter higher education.
And the thing I caught that I liked a lot was the fact that you have officers and enlisted soldiers, enlisted members as well inside the program, because oftentimes you don't see that in different programs. You see like the officers in a different place and enlisted personnel usually find themselves in, but you have that culmination of both tied together in these different programs and taking advantage of these different opportunities.
Absolutely. So I was enlisted. I was actually a Navy corpsman, spending most of my time with the United States Marine Corps. And this opportunity, you're correct, John, is not specifically for officers. It's not specifically for the enlisted population. Every service member has the right to participate in the program, again, granted upon your command's approval, mission readiness, et cetera. With our enlisted population that are typically coming, and you can view, I'll give you an example, Joe Quinn, Staff Sergeant Quinn, well, forgive me, now Joe Quinn, he's a veteran now, was an enlisted Marine. Joe told me in our initial conversation that his dream has been to get a PhD in economics from the University of Chicago.
Wow.
And as a corpsman, who served with the Marine Corps, there's always some humor in that because that's what we do between the corpsmen and the Marines. And I said, okay, Joe, are you serious about this? He said, yes. So we placed Joe with the Center for Economics on Human Development at the University of Chicago for his 6-month internship under Professor Heckman, who is a Noble Laureate. He did so well in this particular program, in the internship, I should say, doing research on economics, that he finished August 12th, I believe, which was a Friday. August 13th, he had full-time employment with the University of Chicago as a research assistant, still working at SAID, or the Center for Economics or Human Development. But also during his internship, he took graduate courses through the University of Chicago. And Joe is now a full-time student in our graduate program at the Harris School for Public Policy, completing his master's in public policy. And I'm going to speak it into existence. When he is successful in completing that particular program, Joe will move on to his PhD in economics.
Go, Joe. That is awesome. I appreciate that. That is awesome. That's a great story.
Yes, I believe I can share this, I think, with Glenda, but it's on our SkillBridge site. I'll text it to Glenda. She can share it with you. You can read Joe's story, and I'll use another one as an example. In some cases where commands may not be willing to allow service members. This is one of the more unfortunate pieces. But we have, he's not a first lieutenant anymore, I should say, but Jacob Morris and his wife, Jessica. Jake was in the Army, and I believe he's given me permission to share this, but he sustained some injuries where he could no longer serve in the military. So he was in the process of getting out. And his command told him that he could not participate in SkillBridge. No valid reason. After several conversations and email exchanges with his command, they allowed him to participate. So Jacob moved here to Chicago. Actually, he's in Bolingbrook. He and his wife, Jessica, they closed on their first home ever. They have a young son, Daniel, who is a little bit younger than my grandson. So I want to say maybe 12 or 13 months. Closed on their first home. His wife was here with the baby, and then his command said, well, hey, you can't participate anymore, which made no sense. After he had, gotten rid of his apartment back at his base, closed on the home here. So we, shifted to allow Jacob to do his internship remotely. He had to go back to his command, or at least to the state where his command was. The unfortunate piece is,
you said, or is this he's regular Army, or what was his situation?
He was regular Army. He was regular Army. But again, went back to no apartment because he had moved all of his furniture and everything here. But long story short, he and his wife both now are full-time employees at the University of Chicago. Her taking on her first employment piece since he chose to serve. They closed on their first home, and Jacob is also now participating in our graduate courses here at the University of Chicago.
Wow. What would make a command prohibit or get in the way of someone getting this kind of program, especially if you pretty much have done all your tours, you're either getting ready to transition out your last 6 months, you're winding things down. You've all been there. In the last 6 months, it's almost like the last 6 months of high school. It's like you're kind of winding down for the most part. You're not really worried about a whole lot of different stuff as you were when you were like in your first year or whatever. You're done. So why would a command try to prohibit somebody from getting to something like this, which is so helpful, not just to the individual, but to the people, the family, and the community around that individual? Because you're literally planting seeds in the community. Not just the veteran community, but the civilian community, the community at large that these people are going to go back to. And hearing a story like the one you shared with Joe, hearing the story you're talking about now, that is something that can really help improve the lives of many, many people and also make this country a stronger place.
Well, I won't try to say that I can understand everybody else's thought process, but I can safely say that, one, it's a lack of awareness of commands fully reading and understanding the instruction. There are no parameters, that states a person needs to have done 20 years and or finished their first, gotten past their first initial contract, right? Mission readiness, I will say, is typically a big part of it. And I know that senior officers and senior enlisted in many cases at commands are graded upon their retention. Unfortunately at the moment, I don't believe many of our service branches have met their recruitment goals. And I think that also plays a big role into it, which is unfortunate. But unless a person is just, not morally, ethically, and legally able to participate, there should be no restrictions on them being able to participate in any SkillBridge program as well as them being able to get that head start on their next career in their lives with their families.
Heads up to the cadre and also the military leaders across the country, the generals and people that are making these policies, or they don't make the policies per se, but the people that are actually making these decisions based on the policies they're trying to interpret. The thing of it is, this is your biggest recruitment tool, one of the biggest recruitment tools that you could actually ever dream of, because of the fact when you have people coming out of the military that have success, the success is what breeds the recruitment. The reason why we're seeing recruitment being so challenging and more challenging as the decades go on. We're not going to go into the endless wars, 20-year wars in Afghanistan, what happened in Iraq and so on, and then Vietnam. We're not going into all that, but that's a whole other story. But when you have people that come through the military that have successful stories, that are able to do things and produce things and become leaders in the community, they then become examples to other people and say, hey, I want that.
You're absolutely right. I shared that same sentiment with the Army Sergeant Major Grinston, when he was here 2 years ago with the city for our Memorial Day program. The way I explained it is that many cases, all the branches are letting out negative billboards. And he said, well, what do you mean, Terrell? I said, well, think about some individuals who leave their commands on bad notes, right? I said, when they have a conversation with their neighbor or someone else who says, hey, I know, Joe served in the military. Let's go talk to him about it, to their 18-year-old child, nephew, etc. I said, what do you think that conversation is going to be like when he or she talks to the 18-year-old? Are they going to be?
I got to cut you off. That's a perfect point to end on, because what is that conversation going to be like when they don't see what is the military's best foot forward? Dr. Terrell Odom, Director of OMAC at the University of Chicago and the Chairman of the Mayor's Advisory Council on Veterans Affairs, thanks for your time.
Thank you so much, sir. You guys have a blessed evening and happy holidays to everyone.
You too. America's Heroes Group. We'll be right back.
Thank you for watching another episode of America's Heroes Group, where we provide education about resources and information for our veterans, military, and their family.
We have in our chase bags, we have a care package of hygiene, we have shaving equipment, we have razors, and for the women we have the same personal hygiene items for them as well. And we want to say thank you for their service. This is Chase Bank. Thank you very much.
People in the neighborhood, free haircuts, the service, and food. Look good. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your service.
Thank you for your service.
Okay. On behalf of Cliff Kelley, America's Heroes Group, we sincerely thank Chase Bank for coming where it matters to help homeless veterans have a hot meal today and a care package. We are sincerely grateful for this partnership. Yeah.
Welcome to America's Heroes Group. Hear your voice where we connect the disconnected intentionally.
Who is Cliff Kelley, the governor of talk radio, the icon of radio throughout the world?
Chauncey Spencer II and I, again, share a special relationship. His late great father, Tuskegee Airman Chauncey E. Spencer, took me as a child on my first airplane ride.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is something that people need to see. Often we don't, do the things to show how great our people are. It changes the paradigm of how people think about us, about the collective consciousness of what it means to be us.
And we've been having great conversations about trying to get more African Americans into aviation. And we got a bill that we're trying to get passed that would allow the Pell Grant.
Welcome back to America's Heroes Group. This time we have a powerful roundtable community outreach section today. It's Saturday, December 17, 2022. December's AIDS Awareness and National Human Rights Month. Our host is Cliff Kelley. I'm Sean Claiborne, the co-host. Our executive producer is Glenda Smith. Our digital media producer is Ivan Ortega of Scouts Honor Productions. And we have a new panelist with us today, Richard Brookshire. He's a co-founder of the Black Veterans Project, a nonpartisan 501c3 nonprofit elevating Black public education around the unique history of Black veterans in the United States. And also a brief background on Richard Brookshire. He was the Director of Communications for Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America and the Deputy Director for Communications Politics at the Human Rights Campaign. He is an alumnus of Morehouse College and Fordham University and holds a Master's of Public Administration in Urban and Social Policy from Columbia University School of International Public Affairs. He served as an Army Infantry combat medic in the wars in Afghanistan, and he has been highlighted in the New York Times, Washington Post, USA Today, The Grill, and other publications. Welcome to the broadcast. How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing good. I'm happy to be here.
Great to have you. So tell us about Black Veterans Project. What's the mission, purpose? What's the agenda of what you're trying to accomplish? And kind of break it down so people can understand there's a lot of stuff going on with this. And it goes into a lot of different areas about
for sure. When we started about 4 years ago, there was a dearth of real digital storytelling around the unique historical barriers that Black veterans had faced around racial discrimination, around the history of bad paper discharges. And there wasn't a lot of reporting about the state of race in the military now. And so what we've tried to do is elevate that conversation, working in tandem with a lot of researchers. Our main partnership has been with Yale Law School. So, I mean, there's a lot. We have done a lot in 4 years. But at the heartbeat of the project, it's research oriented, and it's about activating that research to advance policies. And at the heartbeat of the project is really kind of redress oriented, reparations oriented, right? Like, how can we potentially kind of aggregate all this research, see if we can get some new data points, and then try to drive home up a policy agenda and some kind of litigation that might, create a pathway or a mechanism for Black vets who've been racially discriminated against by the VA to get some level of real redress. Because we know the historical record, right? Like, I think in the Black veteran community, it's widely known, it's almost commonplace that we know that just racial discrimination is a fact of our existence. But there hadn't been, a real robust effort in recent years to try to figure out how to bring all that together and really leverage digital tools, and really the internet as an organizing tool to try to bring some pressure to bear and see if we can actually get some redress done. So that's been at the heartbeat of the work.
So take us into some more details about some of that, some of the discrimination and also the history and the treatment of African Americans and even Native Americans as well, and people of brown and black skin color. So we have something coming up, the GI Bill Restoration Act. So using that as a starting point, kind of take us back into the history and some of the inequities and some of the disparities of how people of color have been treated in the military versus what the mainstream population was able to receive from the benefits of being in uniform.
Yeah, so, taking a look at the GI Bill Restoration Act, this kind of landmark legislation that was introduced, it has not been passed. Earlier in the 117th Congress, so about a year and a half ago now, by Senator Warnock, Congressman Claiborne, and Congressman Moulton. And what they were trying to do is basically send out a message that there needs to be something done about the fact that Black veterans were largely locked out of the GI Bill, especially at the advent of its inception after World War II. So kind of circling back, the original GI Bill became law in 1944. It was a landmark kind of social policy that, for the first time, really afforded working class men who served in the military and women access to zero VA back home loans and education benefits. But because of a national kind of network of Jim Crow laws, and it didn't just exist in the South, it very much existed and was codified in different ways in the North through redlining, racial covenants, and racially discriminatory practices and collegiate admissions. Black vets were largely locked out of it. So the statistics vary. It's been actually really difficult to pin down exactly how many Black vets actually got access to it. But we know that they were diminutive based off of studies like Mississippi, where I think over the course of 1945 to 1956, less than 5% of Black veterans who lived in Mississippi were able to access their GI Bill, or states like New York, right? Like when you had, years would go by and one or two or three Black veterans would be able to secure a home loan. And then, for the most part, Black vets weren't able to really utilize their education benefits. I think a lot of people assume that, Black vets just went to HBCUs, but HBCUs looked a lot different in the past, right? They were smaller and they couldn't absorb the million or more Black troops that actually were returning. And so, small numbers of Black vets actually ended up going to HBCUs. And that really created the seeds of an economic chasm that we still see today. There was a recent study by Brandeis University that showed that for every Black veteran that in World War II that didn't get access to their benefit, their family is owed about $180,000 in benefits that white families got full access to. And it created the modern American middle class. And a lot of people don't really understand or don't really kind of compute that history. And a lot of our project is to try to lay that fundamental understanding down for folks. And then kind of, going forward, as you look into Vietnam and the Gulf War, and even today, bad paper discharges have been like a huge mechanism that has locked countless Black vets out of tens of billions of dollars of economic welfare that they would have been otherwise afforded had they had full access to the myriad of benefits that you can get as a veteran. And so there's a need to reckon with that history in a real way, and then to bring new research to bear. So we were able to help support a recent study that showed even over the last 5 years, it was a study by the Connecticut Veterans Legal Center, and it showed that from 2015 to 2020, Black service members even today are 1.5 to 2.3, depending on the branch of service, but almost twice as likely to get out of the military and not have access to their benefits. So the history is still continuing, and there's a real need to address it.
So what do you think is the problem today as far as African Americans and people of color accessing the benefits? I had a conversation. This is interesting because I had a conversation about this twice, actually. We did it once in a show last week. We had Stephanie Collada, who founded the Veterans Legislative Voice, and we talked about this as well. We talked about the GI Bill Restoration Act and Senator Warnock's participation in it. And we also talked about the history of the fact that, people that came back from World War II, everybody is assumed in our own minds in history, we think, you're a veteran. People don't realize that blacks and whites served in segregated units in World War II. That originally in the military, African Americans weren't even allowed to really take on all the jobs that were offered to everybody else in the military. So African Americans had to be servants, laborers, cooks, guys to clean everything up on the ship or whatever if you're in the Navy, or doing all the labor work in the battlefield and in World War II. And coming home and watching people that were prisoners of war, people that they were fighting against, getting better treatment than they were getting. People coming home on transportation or being flown home by the military back to their communities, and they're watching former Nazis fly first class, and they're in the back of the plane. If they get on the plane, they probably stick up on the back of the bus. You know what I'm saying? Seeing that reality. And then being told, okay, well, you got the GI Bill, but nobody's taking your GI Bill. Nobody's going to allow you to use a GI Bill. And then you touched on that really important point of the fact that, so imagine what the world would look like, what this country would look like if over 1 million people who served in World War II, if they were able to participate in the GI Bill, if they came back and brought those dollars you mentioned to Black colleges. Because there was segregation still, in 1945, there was still plenty of segregation going around. So a lot of them wouldn't have been able to go to, traditional mainstream universities. Some people call them white universities. I always call them mainstream universities because really they're very diverse when you look at the real population. Huge Asian communities in major universities, of course. It's no surprise if you've been to any major university, you'll see a large Asian community as well. But when you go and look at what African Americans were afforded to participate in at that time, and even from decades later, all that money would have flowed into these HBCUs, historically Black colleges, and they would have built up these universities, and they would be different institutions today if they had those millions and millions of dollars invested in those institutions. and then breeding a whole nother generation of thought leaders that would have came from the military. We just talked about this with the University of Chicago. We just had Dr. Terrell Odom who's talked about this, had this same conversation of things we're doing today with, Skill Bridge, which is a program taking service members and training them to transition and to do things, great things, and to contribute and build up communities around the country. So you're taking that away from African Americans and the history of this development of this country and our neighborhoods.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you surmised it well, right? And I think that there's been different levers that have kind of been pulled at different times in history to lock Black vets out of these quintessential veterans benefits that you get if you serve, which are education, housing, healthcare, and that's really where we made some strides, right? Really trying to get more data around health. Disability compensation disparities. So for 2 years at the beginning of the project, we partnered with Yale and we said, hey, we want to get our hands on data. We know that data is really the starting point for any kind of legislative redress and any kind of litigation that we might, try to try our hand at. And so we did a quite large, one of the largest data pools around racial disparities in VA's history, looking at 20 years of data relating to disability compensation. And we were able to show that for 2 decades, from 2000 to basically the present day, there has been statistically significant differences in the rate of denials that Black vets have faced for disability compensation. And one of the most alarming ones that we were able to show that was from 2015 to more recent data showed that Black veterans were almost 30% more likely to get denied for PTSD compensation. And so when you intersect that and the fact that we're twice as likely to be as homeless, face higher joblessness rates, and often return to resource poor communities and aren't well educated about accessing our benefits in general, it is, I think, the final piece of the puzzle to really paint a very clear historical narrative, right? And so we took that data and we basically said, hey, from what the VA said in court over the course of a year and a half of litigating the FOIA request was that they didn't even study racial disparities for 20 years. So they knew that they were coming out of a long legacy of racial discrimination affecting veterans' access. And for 20 years, the VA didn't even study the issue. And so we're basically using that along with the statistically significant difference in disability compensation, along with all the other history we talked about, right? The obstruction around GI Bill, the proliferation of bad paper discharges, and we've tried to use one case to paint a very specific argument. So let me walk y'all through that case. So there's a gentleman by the name of Conley Monk, and as I continue to talk with y'all, I'm going to try to bring him on the show and have a conversation so your audience can get to know him. Conley was a Vietnam War veteran. And I like to start his story by the fact that his father was a World War II veteran who came back, served honorably, and never accessed the GI Bill. So Conley comes in, a generation later, growing up in New Haven, joins to go fight as a Marine in Vietnam, serves honorably, but after his first tour gets into an altercation with a superior who calls him a racial epithet. They get into a physical altercation, and I know a lot of Vietnam vets can relate to that. And he ended up getting kicked out, and he had a dishonorable discharge. But he didn't know how dishonorable discharge would affect him. He was working for the VA before working at the VA before he had even joined the Marines. So when he got back to his community in New Haven, they wouldn't even give him his job back. And he struggled for over 40 years to get access to his benefits. And despite that, and despite, dealing with, all untold, undiagnosed and untreated PTSD, he had to put himself through school. He wasn't able to buy a home, for his family with this GI Bill, and really, really struggled. But he started working with Yale in the early 90s, and he was also, big in the community and really trying to support and try to help other vets get access to their benefits, all while he didn't have access to his. And he started working with Yale in the early 90s. In 2015, he finally won a case, and it was a landmark case. And it was a landmark case because it essentially, for the first time, gave people who had been diagnosed with PTSD or a traumatic brain injury who did not have access to their veterans benefits because they didn't have an honorable discharge. Because of Conley's win in 2015, they could now apply and would likely get access to their benefits if they've been diagnosed with PTSD. And he was able to win a 3-year settlement, basically going 3 years of back pay for the money that the VA owed him, which was about $150,000. And because of that, was able to buy a beautiful home for his family that I was able to go and visit earlier this year. But he's suing because not only because he didn't know that the VA was discriminating against him, and our data basically proves that they understood and they knew that there was an issue and did nothing to address it. They're by default being grossly negligent and wanting to actually address why racial disparities were so rampant. And he's basically suing for all the back pay and the damages done to him because he should have had access to his benefits since 1971. He should have had access to disability compensation for 100% PTSD, which he does now have. He should have had access to zero VA back home loan. He should have had access to education benefits. He didn't have access to that, so he's suing for $1 million in damages. And then he's also suing on behalf of his deceased father because it's intergenerational for so many vets, for so many black vets, and minority vets. So this applies to Latino and Native American vets as well, but my focus has been on black vets. And his father didn't get access to the GI Bill, and he's suing on behalf of that. And at the end of the day, it's really it's never really been done for. Like, this lawsuit is historic in many ways, because not only are we bringing new data to the table to actually file the suit, but we're suing it under the FTCA, saying that the VA has been grossly negligent. And we don't know what's going to happen, right? We're hoping that at the very least, VA comes to the table and actually admits the wrongs that it's done to black vets and wants to move forward with some kind of recompense, right? Because you can't talk about equity and inclusion and all these other types of things and not really reckon with the damage that you've done to the black community. And we're talking about tens of billions of dollars siphoned out of the black community because black vets weren't getting full and equal access to their benefits. So, yeah.
And my bones, I feel that the military will make the right decision at some point. I think we're getting a lot more wiser, although there is still a lot of conservative voices out there, ultra conservative voices out there that lump everything into woke consciousness and all kind of weird stuff, whatever like that. But really, woke consciousness is just a reinvented hip hop version of black consciousness that came out of the '60s and '70s and been around forever. But all this stuff gets distorted in media and gets distorted. And at least in the arguments pro and con and by partisanship and things like that, people joining, sticking with their team, whether they're liberal, conservative, whatever. Put all that stuff to the side and let's look at what's right and what's wrong. Looking at the real data, looking at the information, getting the information, the data is so critical. I'm so proud of what you guys are doing because of the fact that you are data focused as opposed to saying, well, this is where we think it ought to be because this is what we think it ought to be. Yeah. No, just looking at what is the facts. What are the facts?
Let's look at the facts. Exactly. Absolutely.
And what is
we want to reckon with that. We want to reckon with the history, and we want transparency, right? So one of the things that we might, be able to come out of the lawsuit, and Senator Blumenthal was able to. He sits on both the House Armed Services and the House Veteran Affairs Committees, the Senate Veteran Affairs Committee, and the Senate Armed Services. Apologies, but he was at the press conference for Connolly's suit, and he said that it was, indeed a very historic because he is very hopeful that this will actually inspire some type of hearing where we actually get to discuss and VA has to come to the table with what it knows and how long it's known it and all of the facts, right? Because I think that's what the historical record owes. But I said that I got the opportunity, and I want before we wrap our conversation today, I wanted the opportunity to talk about the bill, this essentially an iteration of the GI Bill Restoration Act. We had a conversation about it. I got the opportunity to testify on the last hearing of the House Veteran Affairs Committee this past week, actually, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But I lost my train of thought. There's so much information to talk about.
The GI Bill Restoration Act. So Senator Warnock was working with that, and then now he's back in office. He got reelected.
Yeah.
And so what are the details of this, and then what will it do to help veterans?
So let's start with the fact that we're in a really, not want to say odd because we've always faced a lot of challenges as Black folk in this country, but we're at an odd time in our country's politics, specifically with the Supreme Court, right? They're really on the verge of potentially knocking down affirmative action and all these types of things, right? So trying to pass some kind of targeted redress bill is actually really hard, right? Not impossible, but difficult, and you have to build the political will for it. And one of the things that I'll give some pats on the back to myself and my team is we've been able to really leverage the media and get this conversation, exposure in the media that then kind of forces, in some respects, congressional leaders to respond, right, and in kind. And because there wasn't really any movement on the GI Bill Restoration Act. I mean, as soon as it got, to Congress, it's kind of almost dead in the water. And not because it wasn't good policy, but because of the fact that we have this landscape that we're having to contend with, which is we might pass some targeted-based racial redress for black vets that then gets knocked down by the Supreme Court, and then nothing ends up passing. That and then the size of the bill, like it's gone anywhere between $30 to $80 billion to potentially give all the direct descendants of Black World War II veterans access to zero VA back home loans and education benefits. I personally think it should be done. We gave $70 billion to Ukraine in a year. It's not something that our country can't afford. It's just a choice, right, that we're making. But I'll rewind this back. So, there was someone by the name of Marcia Spatzer who wrote this really brilliant piece of potential legislation. It's only in draft form right now, and that's what we were discussing at the most recent hearing of the House Veteran Affairs Committee. And this bill is important because it would look to give the descendants of World War II, Korean War, and Vietnam veterans, no matter what color they were, if they didn't use their benefit, then they can pass it down to their descendants. That's what the bill is basically saying. And now there's some stipulations, and it's explicitly looking at the VA home loan, right? Which is important because you think about the building of generational wealth, the ability to be able to buy a home without any money down is really actually important because trying to put money down on a home is the biggest barrier for most people to buy a house right now, right?
Exactly right.
But long story short, this bill is essentially facially neutral, which basically means it's not race specific. It just so happens that the majority of people that would benefit from this bill happen to be the black descendants because they were the ones that their forefathers weren't able to actually use the benefit, so they would be able to pass it down. Now, they want to put some stipulations on it, like they want to make it so that only first-time home buyers could potentially use it in order to kind of whittle down the number. But at this particular point, the way that the bill is written, about somewhere between 1.5 to 2 million descendants would tentatively have access to the zero VA back home loan. Listen, redress is complicated. Reparations is a complicated project, right? Like, it's easy to talk about in broad strokes, but when you get down to the nitty-gritty and trying to make redress policy, you come up against some real challenges. But this bill is a starting point, right? Trying to think about how can we actually get something passed in Congress that would redress this really significant racial harm, right? It's really significant that has impacted and continues to impact families, really. Because when you talk about black veterans, you're talking about their families, right? Who weren't able to buy a home, or if they did, they struggled to, right? Because they didn't have access to this really crucial benefit. So I'm optimistic about the bill. There seems to be a desire to want to move forward with it in the 118th Congress, but we're going to have a Republican House, so we might have to wait another 2 years, right? So there's still a lot of groundwork that needs to happen. And where we're really wanting to focus our attention as a project really is beginning to storytell, right? Like, we've been able to really leverage research, but now it's about there are millions of stories out there, and we need to kind of bring them to a space and make it digestible to the public so we can build the political case to make this happen and other types of redress, because we're really scratching the surface of what redress can actually look like right now, right, relative to veterans not being able to get access to their benefits. And the last thing, and there hasn't actually been any kind of legislative movement, but a lot of legislators have kind of hinted at wanting to address the proliferation of bad paper discharges and wanting to figure out some kind of mechanism that can make it easier for black vets who've been historically locked out of their benefits to get access to their benefits, right? And potentially see how their descendants might be able to benefit as well. So that is something I'm really hopeful about, but continue to have conversations and bring brilliant other minds to the table, because I'm sure these are not new ideas, right? I think black vets have been wanting to see things like this happen for a very long time. But the thing that's allowing us to be able to be effective is we have data that we've never had before, right? And we have the internet, so we're really able to leverage relationships with the press and build momentum in that way. So that's where we're at.
I appreciate your time, Richard Brookshire. That is really important information. You're the co-founder of Black Veterans Project, a nonpartisan 501c3 nonprofit elevating public education around the unique history of black veterans in the United States. And last time I checked, there's no statute of limitations on debt. You might be able to get it off your credit with a few tricks, but a debt owed is a debt owed.
We love to see it. Thank you for having me.
Our pleasure. Glenda?
Okay.
What a wonderful show that has been. All 4 shows today. Phenomenal. That's what we do at America's Heroes Group. We connect the disconnected to resources and information.
Yeah.
That ain't told, that will be told. That's what we do. We lay it down and tell it like it is.
Right. Some information is stuff that people don't really hear about too often. The things that are like on page 17 of the Washington Post or whatever, we can bring it front and center because these are things that actually shape and impact our communities.
Absolutely. Today, I share some sad news on behalf of Claude Fields, who is a dedicated, unwavering America's Heroes Group community outreach ambassador, has been since 2016, have been totally supportive of Cliff and America's Heroes Group. Whenever we needed him, he was always there and still is. He's a father of a U.S. Marine Corps veteran, and he shared with me earlier this week that his mom passed away earlier this month. He also shared with me that his love for our military, the respect and appreciation that he truly has from his heart. I mean, when I say care, you guys think I love veterans. He loved them more than me almost. He said that came from the respect and appreciation and the compassion came from his parents. His mother and dad taught him to understand the essence of what our military is and the service that they give to America. So it is with extended heart and sincere condolences that we offer our sincere condolences to Claude and his entire family on the passing of his mom, because he is a member and a family of America's Heroes Group. And so I know him, he was so good to her. He told me couple years ago that her health has started declining, and just recently he and his sister were dedicated 100% to taking care of her. So the Bible say, honor thy parents, thy mother and thy father, that thy days on earth will be long. Claude did that. So I don't want to get choked up. I just want to say today's show is dedicated to Claude, his father, and his mother. In a moment of silence, we honor them.
Thank you for watching another episode of America's Heroes Group, where we provide education about resources and information for our veterans, military, and their family.